You wore that to Mom's funeral? My sister sneered, her diamond cuff nearly blinding me as she flipped her perfectly styled hair. I mean, I get it, times are tough for you, but couldn't you have at least tried? I smoothed down my simple black dress, hiding a smile. What she didn't know, I designed this dress. The air in the cathedral was colder than the marble floor. Shelby stood there, wrapped in faux concern and very real, expensive fabric, judging the only thing I had left to give our mother. My best work. To her, it was a rag. To the fashion world, it was a $65,000 prototype. I didn't correct her. I just let her dig her own grave. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I walked out of the heavy oak doors before the service even ended. The air outside was biting, gray and thick, with the promise of snow. I climbed into my Volvo, the engine sputtering a little as it turned over. It was a prop, just like my silence. I drove south, away from the Upper East Side, away from the suffocating weight of their expectations. The city blurred past my window, a wash of steel and concrete, until I reached the meatpacking district. I parked in the alley behind a nondescript brownstone. The brick was weathered, the windows dark. To anyone walking by, it looked like an abandoned warehouse, or maybe a failed artist's studio. I pressed my palm against a sensor hidden behind a loose brick. The heavy steel door clicked open. Inside, the air was different, clean, filtered. It smelled of ozone and fresh linen. The lights flickered on as I walked in, revealing a cavernous space of glass and white light. This was ether, my sanctuary, my empire. I walked past the rows of three-dimensional printers and the racks of experimental textiles. My staff knew better than to disturb me when I came in through the back. I went straight to my office, a glass cube suspended above the work floor. I sat down at my terminal and logged in. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could see Shelby's face in my mind, the way her lip curled when she looked at my dress. For years, I had let them treat me like this. I had let them believe I was boring, poor, uninteresting. It wasn't weakness, it was strategy. The gray rock method. You become a smooth, featureless stone. You offer them nothing, no emotion, no drama, no success to envy. If you are boring, they ignore you. And if they ignore you, they don't look closely at what you are building in the dark. I had built ether in the shadow of their neglect. They thought I was struggling to pay rent on a studio apartment. I was negotiating contracts with global luxury brands. They thought I was single and lonely. I was married to my work. My poverty was my camouflage. It kept their greed away from my door. But today, standing over my mother's casket, Shelby had crossed a line. She hadn't just insulted me. She had insulted the one thing I had left of my mother, her dignity. Mom had known. She was the only one who knew. She had seen the sketches, touched the fabrics. She had kept my secret until the very end. I pulled up the contract database. Shelby was listed as a Tier 1 brand ambassador. I had given her that contract anonymously 6 months ago. A lifeline when her influencer metrics started to tank. I paid her triple the market rate. I had been subsidizing her lifestyle, her diamond cuffs, her arrogance. I didn't feel angry. Anger is hot and messy. I felt cold, precise, like a surgeon making an incision. I selected her file. Status: active. I clicked the drop-down menu. Terminate. Reason: violation of morality clause. The system asked for confirmation. I didn't hesitate. I hit enter. On the screen, the status changed to terminated. Across the city, Shelby's phone would be buzzing with a notification she wouldn't understand. She would call her agent. She would scream. She would panic. And I would sit here in the silence I had bought and paid for, and I would watch it all burn. The next 24 hours were a masterclass in denial. I monitored their movements through the digital trails they left behind, credit card pings, social media updates, the frantic text messages intercepted by the security software I had installed on their devices years ago. It wasn't spying, it was risk management. When your family is a liability, you keep tabs on the exposure. They gathered at the Hamptons estate the next evening. I watched the security feed from the library. Benjamin was pacing. a glass of scotch in his hand. The fog pressed against the windows, isolating them, trapping them in their own panic. Brandon was slumped on the leather sofa, his head in his hands. "The liquidity is gone," Brandon said, his voice tinny through the microphone. "The venture capital fund is dry. My investors are pulling out. If I don't cover the margin call by Monday, they're going to liquidate my personal assets." Benjamin stopped pacing. "I can't help you. The trust is empty. Your mother, she didn't leave what I thought she would." "What about the brownstone?" Shelby asked. She was curled in a wingback chair, scrolling furiously on her phone. "The one in the city. Mom loved that place. It's prime real estate. We sell it, we cover Brandon's mess, we have enough left over to float us for a year." I leaned back in my chair, watching them. They were talking about my lab. My home. They thought it was part of the estate. They thought they could just liquidate my life to pay for their mistakes. "Isabella is living there," Benjamin said, waving a hand dismissively. "We'll have to evict her." "She can find another apartment," Shelby snapped. "She's used to living in squalor anyway. She probably won't even notice the difference. We need that money, Dad. I just lost the ether contract. They dropped me. For nothing. Some morality clause bullshit." "We'll sue them," Brandon muttered. "Wrongful termination." "We can't sue anyone if we're bankrupt," Benjamin retorted. "We sell the brownstone. It's the only asset with equity. I'll call the broker in the morning. We'll list it by noon." They didn't even hesitate. They didn't ask if I would be okay. They didn't care. They needed a victim to feed their lifestyle, and I was the designated sacrifice. But then, the conversation shifted to something darker. Something calculated. "The termination looks bad, Shelby," Brandon said, sitting up. "If news gets out that Aether dropped you for morality, your other sponsors will bail. We need to control the narrative. We need a reason why you're stepping back. Something sympathetic." Shelby looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Like what?" "Like grief," Brandon said. "The gears were turning. Mom just died. You're too devastated to work. But that's not enough. We need a villain. Someone who made Mom's final days harder. Someone whose negligence caused the stress that killed her." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. "Isabella," Shelby whispered. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. She was the only one with Mom at the end. We were all working. Building the family legacy. Isabella was just sitting there. We can say she mismanaged Mom's care, that she stressed her out with her failures, that I'm taking a step back from modeling to launch a foundation in Mom's honor, to raise awareness for elder neglect. Anonymous tip to page 6, Benjamin added, nodding slowly. We don't say it directly, we let the press connect the dots. Sources close to the family say the younger sister is devastated by the older sister's incompetence. It saves your brand, Brandon said. And it discredits Isabella if she tries to fight the eviction? Who's going to side with the daughter who killed her mother? I closed the video feed. The screen went black, reflecting my own face. I didn't feel hurt. Hurt implies surprise. I felt a cold, hard certainty settling in my chest. They weren't just greedy. They were cannibals. They were willing to feast on my reputation, my home, and my grief, just to keep their illusions alive for one more fiscal quarter. They wanted to sell my sanctuary. They wanted to rewrite history to make me the villain of my mother's death. I picked up my phone and dialed my lead counsel. Initiate the purchase, I said. The debt on the Hamptons estate. And Brandon's venture capital liabilities. Buy it all. It's distressed debt, Isabella, my lawyer warned. It's junk. You'll be buying pennies on the dollar, but it's still a loss. I'm not buying it for the return, I said. I'm buying the leverage. I want to be the one holding the paper when they default. Understood. We can execute by morning. Do it. And keep my name off the paperwork. Use the holding company. I hung up. I looked at the black screen one last time. They were still arguing, pouring more scotch, making plans for money that wasn't theirs. They had no idea that the roof over their heads now belonged to the daughter they planned to destroy. The confirmation email arrived at 6 a.m. Transaction complete. Transfer of deed and debt obligations, successful. I drank my coffee, black, staring at the screen. It was done. I now owned the mortgage on my father's Hamptons estate. I owned the distressed debt of my brother's venture capital firm. I wasn't just their family member anymore. I was their creditor. I held the leash to their entire existence, and they didn't even know who was holding the other end. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt efficient. This was just housekeeping. At 9 a.m., the security system at the brownstone alerted me to a disturbance at the front entrance. I switched the monitor feed. Shelby was there. She was pounding on the heavy steel door of what she thought was my squalid apartment, but was actually the discreet service entrance to the lab. She looked manic, sunglasses too big for her face, a frantic energy vibrating off her like heat. I buzzed her in. She stormed past the reception desk, ignoring the biometric scanners disguised as art installations. She marched straight into the small front office, where I handled the boring administrative tasks I let my family see. "Fix it!" she hissed, slamming her hand on my desk. "Fix it, Isabella." "Fix what?" I asked, not looking up from my tablet. "Ether. They terminated me. I lost the contract. I lost the monthly stipend. I lost the access." She paced the small room, her heels clicking aggressively on the concrete floor. "I know you know people. You said you did some data entry for their logistics team once. Call them. Tell them it was a mistake." I looked at her. It was fascinating, really. She was standing in the lobby of a multi-billion-dollar company, screaming at the CEO, demanding that the help fix her life. It was the perfect example of the illusion of the empty wallet. She was so hollow, so devoid of actual substance, that she couldn't perceive value unless it was draped in a logo. She saw a plain desk and a plain sister, so she assumed there was no power here. She assumed I existed solely to service her needs because she couldn't imagine a world where she wasn't the protagonist. "I can't get you the ambassador role back," I said calmly. "That decision came from the top. Then get me something else. Anything. I need cash flow, Isabella. Dad's cutting me off if I don't contribute to the legal fund." I opened a drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I had drafted it myself the night before. "I can get you a probationary contract," I said. "It's entry level. Junior brand affiliate. It pays a fraction of what you were making. But it gets you back in the system. It gets you the credentials." Shelby snatched the paper from my hand. She didn't read it. She didn't even glance at the terms. She just saw a lifeline for her ego. "Fine," she snapped. "Whatever. Where do I sign?" "Read it, Shelby," I said. "The terms are strict. I don't care about the terms. I just need the access." She uncapped a pen and scribbled her signature at the bottom. She threw the paper back at me. "Submit it. Today. And don't mess it up." She turned and marched out, the heavy door slamming behind her. I picked up the document. She hadn't read paragraph 14. The Trojan horse clause. By signing this, Shelby had agreed that any public disparagement of Ether or its employees would result in immediate forfeiture of her independent social media revenue and likeness rights to the company for a period of 5 years. She was planning to launch a smear campaign against me and Ether to save her reputation. She was planning to blame me for our mother's death, but with this signature, she had just handed me the copyright to her own voice. If she screamed, I got paid. If she lied, I owned the lie. I scanned the document into the legal database. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for her to step into it. 3 days later, my lead counsel called. I was reviewing the dye saturation on the new autumn line, but his tone made me stop. "Isabella," he said, and his voice was tight. "We found something during the audit of the Hamptons property. You need to see this. Send it." A file popped up on my screen. It was a scan of a document found in my father's private safe, which we had legally accessed as the new lien holders. It was a patent application, dated 15 years ago. It detailed the chemical structure of the biodegradable silk blend that was Ether's flagship product. The fabric that had put us on the map. The fabric I had invented in my college dorm room. But the name on the applicant line wasn't mine, it was Benjamin's. And at the bottom, next to his signature, was my mother's signature, witnessing the claim. I zoomed in. The ink looked old, the paper yellowed. But I knew my mother's hand, the loop of the L, the sharp cross of the teat. This wasn't her signature. It was a tracing. A forgery. He's been sitting on this, my lawyer said. He drafted a lawsuit against Ether 6 months ago. He claims he invented the polymer, and that Ether stole it. He claims your mother was his witness. He was waiting for her to die so she couldn't contradict him. I felt the blood drain from my face. My father wasn't just a failed investor. He was a thief. He had watched me build my company from the shadows, not knowing it was mine, and he had plotted to steal it from the CEO he thought was a stranger. He was going to sue his own daughter for the work of her life, using a forgery of his dead wife's signature as the weapon. He doesn't know you're the CEO, the lawyer continued. He thinks he's suing a faceless corporation. He sent the intent to sue this morning. He wants a settlement of $50 million. I closed the file. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. This was no longer just about debt or disrespect. This was criminal fraud. This was a felony. He had desecrated my mother's name to rob me. Set the meeting, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow, metallic. Summon them. All of them. Tell them the CEO of Ether wants to discuss a settlement. Where? The boardroom. 52nd floor. Tomorrow at noon. Isabella, are you sure? Once you do this, there is no going back. I know, I said. I burned the bridge when I bought the debt. Now, I'm just lighting the match. They arrived at the Ether headquarters at 11:55. I watched them on the security feed in the elevator. Benjamin had found a new suit. Likely bought on credit. He adjusted his cufflinks, looking at his reflection in the steel doors, with a practiced sneer. Brandon stood beside him, trying to look important, clutching a briefcase that I knew contained only desperation. Shelby was checking her makeup in the reflection, rehearsing her victim face. They looked like sharks circling a raft. They had no idea they were swimming in a tank, and I was the one tapping on the glass. My assistant led them into the main boardroom. It was a masterpiece of intimidation, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking Central Park, a table made of reclaimed obsidian. Silence so deep it felt heavy. I sat at the head of the table, my high-backed chair turned away from the door, facing the view of the city I had conquered. Gentlemen, Benjamin's voice boomed, rich with false confidence. And Miss Shelby. Thank you for seeing us. We are here to discuss the irregularities with your intellectual property. I didn't move. We have proof, Brandon added, his voice higher, tighter. Patent documents. Dated prior to your incorporation. We know you stole the formula. We are prepared to go to the press, unless a reasonable arrangement can be reached. 50 million, Benjamin said. Wire transfer, and we drop the suit. I waited a beat, then another. I let their demands hang in the air, let them taste their own greed. Then, I spun the chair. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. Benjamin's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Brandon dropped his briefcase. It hit the floor with a dull thud. Shelby gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Hello, father, I said. Isabella? Benjamin whispered. He looked around the room, as if expecting the real CEO to jump out from behind a curtain. What are you doing here? This is a private meeting. You can't be here. You're the receptionist? I'm not the receptionist, I said. I pressed a button on the console built into the table. The privacy glass frosted over, sealing us in. The lights dimmed. The 80-inch screen behind me flared to life. I am Ether. On the screen, a document appeared. The deed to the Hamptons estate. Owner, Ether Holdings, LLC. Next to it, the distressed debt portfolio of Brandon's venture capital firm. Owner, Ether Holdings, LLC. And finally, the Trojan horse contract Shelby had signed. Owner, Ether Holdings, LLC. I own the roof over your head, I said, my voice calm, projecting to the back of the room. I own the debt that is drowning you. And Shelby, I own your voice. This is insane, Brandon stammered. You live in a brownstone, you're nobody. I am the person who bought your debt for 12 cents on the dollar, I corrected. And this? I clicked the remote. The forged patent document appeared on screen, blown up to massive proportions. This is a forgery. Forensic analysis confirms the ink is less than 5 years old. Mom didn't sign this. You traced it from her will. Benjamin collapsed into the nearest chair. He looked old, suddenly. The bluster evaporated, leaving only a frightened man in a cheap suit. You can't prove that, he wheezed. Your mother. She supported me. She would have wanted me to have this. She despised your greed, a voice said from the doorway. We all turned. The heavy glass door slid open. Aunt Patricia walked in. She was leaning on a cane, but she moved with the force of a glacier. She was the matriarch of the extended family, the one person Benjamin feared. She wore a suit that cost more than Brandon's car. Patricia? Benjamin stood up, trembling. What are you doing here? I'm checking on my investment, she said coldly. She walked past him, ignoring his outstretched hand, and came to stand beside me. She put a hand on my shoulder. I gave Isabella the seed money, Patricia announced, looking at them with pure disgust. 10 years ago. She came to me with a business plan and a fabric sample. I knew you were a fraud, Benjamin. I knew you would drain her dry if you knew she had talent. So we made a deal. She would build it in silence, and I would keep the wolves away. She looked at Brandon and Shelby. You two are just like him, useless, vain, parasites. Benjamin sank back into his chair. Patricia, please. We're family. Isabella is my family, Patricia said. You? You are a liability. I looked at them. The table was turned. The power was shifted. They weren't sharks anymore. They were bait. Here is the reality, I said. I am foreclosing on the Hamptons' house on Monday. Brandon, I am calling in your margin loans on Tuesday. And Shelby, if you post one word about this meeting, I trigger the penalty clause in your contract and seize your accounts. Shelby began to sob. Brandon looked at the floor. Benjamin just stared at the table, defeated. You're ruining us, he whispered. Why? Spite? Education, I said. I slid a folder across the obsidian table. I'm not leaving you homeless. I'm not cruel. I'm offering you a choice. Benjamin opened the folder. His eyes widened. Employment contracts? Entry level, I said. Logistics, sanitation, warehouse inventory, minimum wage, full benefits though. I'm a generous employer. You want us to clean toilets? Shelby choked out. I want you to work, I said. For the first time in your lives. I want you to understand that money is exchanged for labor, not for existence. This is my offer. You work for Ether. You clock in, you clock out. You live in company housing, simple, clean apartments in Queens. You pay rent from your wages. And if we refuse? Brandon asked, trying to summon a shred of dignity. Then I hand the forgery evidence to the FBI, I said. And the Securities and Exchange Commission gets your trading history, Brandon. And you go to prison. Real prison. Not the country club. The silence stretched. I could hear the hum of the air filtration system. I could hear their breathing shallow, terrified. Benjamin picked up the pen. His hand shook, but he signed. Brandon followed. Then, Shelby. They didn't look at me. They couldn't. Welcome to Ether, I said. Don't be late on Monday. I sat in my lab, the brownstone quiet around me. It was late. The city outside was asleep, but I was awake, sketching. The silence was different now. It wasn't the silence of hiding, it was the silence of peace. My family was gone, in a way. The versions of them that haunted me, the judges, the bullies, the parasites, had been dismantled. Now, they were just employees. Clock number 402, 403, and 404, they would learn. Or they wouldn't. But they would never hurt me again. I looked at the sketch on my tablet. It was a dress. Sharp angles, high collar, armored but elegant. I would call it the retribution. Real power doesn't need to scream. Sometimes, the loudest move you can make is winning in silence. If you agree, hit that like button, and share this with someone who needs to hear it.